Today we need to get into people saying that V needs to break his silence and sue the label over some mistreatment. We also need to get into V getting emotional today. And then we have CEOs reported to be talking about how they don't care about BTS being active anymore. So to Hey Dumplings, it's Dave Desai. Hater or not, make sure you're subscribed with the notification bell on. And make sure you join us fangirling on Patreon, and let's go. Recently, a lot of people have been very upset because there's been a lot of news articles that have come out where the title or the headline will be reporting how the label doesn't need BTS anymore. And they're fine with a lot of the newer artists they have come out now. Now, if you don't know what this is all about, let's talk about it. Basically, for a long time, BTS was almost the sole income stream for the label. When the label first started, BTS was really their only act, and it became almost like 90% of their income at one point, allegedly. So it was believed that the label heavily relied on BTS, and a lot of people were wondering what would happen if BTS either goes to the military or no longer wants to be a group anymore. Would the label then falter, or would they completely sink and disappear? After all, they were growing so fast and so big that they became one of the top labels, but it was almost believed to be only because of BTS. However, it wasn't long after that they formed the group TXT. They also formed other groups like New Jeans and as well as the Seraphim. At first, it didn't seem like these groups really did much, and people were still very concerned as to what was going to happen if BTS went to the military. And it was rumored and talked about that the stock had dropped a bit when BTS went to the military. It was also believed that the stock had dropped once BTS mentioned that they were going to go on a hiatus. Now, flash forward into modern day, BTS has all enlisted, and people have been wondering how the label is doing in terms of their stock and sales, and if it is true. However, the label did something very smart and not only diversified and added more groups, but they also went ahead and signed new labels to their label, signed other managements, and even signed a lot of existing artists, to which have all been able to supplement the income that BTS was making for them. So the headlines recently have been talking about how the label no longer needs BTS because they all have these newer groups. Of course, as you can imagine, the community isn't going to take that well because it comes across in such a way of, well, now that I'm successful, I no longer need the things that made me where I am now. And people were saying that this makes it feel like BTS was taken for granted. And then there's been other rumors of people saying, well, if they didn't need BTS so much, then why are they still using BTS in the headlines? Because they know that the name still gets attention. Well, first off, I don't believe it makes it look like BTS is being taken for granted, because it's not like they were saying this is out of nowhere. This was genuinely such a big story and such a big concern for people. And of course, even after the alleged hiatus was mentioned, people had left. So all HYBE is doing is trying to get those people to come back by saying it actually isn't over for the label. And a reason or a theory that I believe why there's so many of these headlines, like when we see a success story that honestly doesn't really do as well as if we see a story of a big company failing. We like to read those stories, especially nowadays that all of us are kind of in a weird situation. We like to see these multi-billion-dollar companies kind of fall down to their knees. So a company saying that they're actually all right and they're okay, it's not a story that's interesting to the general public. Second of all, I don't believe that they were inputting BTS's name in the headlines to get BTS fans to read the headlines. I believe they were putting BTS's name in the headlines because they are related to the story. Again, most people thought that BTS was the sole income of the label. So yeah, they have to mention the group's name. That's like saying if there's a story about a specific BTS member that they can't put the name in the headlines anymore because they put it in there because it's relevant. For example, there's recently been a story of V in a Japanese show. And of course, they put BTS in the tag and in the title because it's relevant. And this is actually a very cute story that I want to talk about as well. Because in the show, V was shown an apron with his dog. So V has been on a reality show where he's cooking and he's working in a restaurant called Ginny's Kitchen. If you want to react to it with me as well as the community, check it out on Patreon. I'll leave a link down in the description. So we know that he likes to cook, and this apron with his album cover, also his dog, probably meant so much to him. And you can see that V's reaction was so genuine and he was so excited. He was so excited to try this on. He was clapping. He was one step away from jumping around at how excited he was to have this apron. And I hope they gave it to him. People were saying that this was very cute, and it was very nice to see V emotional in this way because we don't really get to see him interact too much lately. A lot of people were wondering if he was a bit depressed because we're seeing less and less of his emotions coming out lately. If you're unaware of what this is about, basically if you go back to some of the older videos of BTS and their group activities, you specifically look at V, you'll see that he was slightly more animated in those videos. So people were wondering in recent times, we don't really see him smile as much. We don't really see him as animated anymore. And people are wondering why that is. Well, the short answer is that people grow and people will change. So when you're seeing someone being animated or goofy or whatever it is, and then as they grow and realize that that's not really their personality anymore, they will either have to fake it for the camera, or they'll just show the camera their genuine self. With the BTS members knowing how authenticity and all that stuff is so important, they're going to just show their true self. However, the reason why something like that can look so jarring and almost like it happened overnight, as if something did go wrong, is kind of because it did happen overnight. Their personality was slowly changing behind the scenes, but on camera they were still showing the same person that you knew. And then literally just one day they realized, I'm just going to show my real self now, and then they just do. And it's jarring to us because it's almost an immediate difference. But in reality, behind the scenes and internally, it's been happening for years. A lot of people hate change, but I don't look at it as a bad thing. I look at it as a really good thing. There's a psychological effect that happens to people who get famous very young. They basically stay the age in which they got famous. So you might look at people who are like much older now, maybe they're fully adults now, but they got famous when they were a kid for being really animated and goofy or whatever, and they're still acting like that because they feel like that's what they need to be famous. Fame almost freezes the person in time, and they might not necessarily be that outside of being on set or on camera, but they might feel like they have to be that alternative personality when they're on camera because that's what made them successful. And this is all done unconsciously. So when someone actually is growing on camera and actually making an effort to show their real self on camera, that is actually really healthy, and they can maintain a good normal mind. And I hope that everyone who gets famous very young does that. Speaking of V, recently he has put out a song, Friends, and there's been a lot of controversy on the song itself. But among that controversy, there's a lot of controversy on how the label has chosen to roll out the promotion. There's been a few things that I want to talk about, one of them being iTunes and people's problem with that, and another one of the label tweeting out a V YouTube account that apparently was an impersonation account, and people are not happy about that. So the first thing that happened with iTunes was that apparently it was V and Cardi B that were on the charts for like the top 2 and 3. I think V was 2 and then Cardi B was 3. In a blink of an eye, it switched, and then V ended up being 3 and Cardi B was 2. It didn't just switch, it kind of switched sales. So to me, it seemed like iTunes had made an initial error and thought that V's sales was Cardi B's sales, and then they just kind of corrected themselves and placed them where they actually were supposed to be. Of course, the community doesn't like that because the community heavily tracks the member success on the charts. So they want accurate numbers to make sure that they're streaming or buying everything and it's counted correctly. However, what I saw that was very interesting was that no one was acknowledging the fact that this could have just been an error on iTunes' behalf, and the number that is currently set is more accurate. But people were saying that iTunes was a scam and that they need to correct this mistake. But what if they did correct the mistake and the mistake has been corrected now? It's just unfathomable for people to believe that maybe we just had slightly less sales. Also, to call iTunes a scam makes no sense at all, because all iTunes really is a service to buy music. Did you buy the music? Did you receive the music? If the answer is yes, then it's not a scam. People were also upset that the official label tweeted out a link to a channel that was supposed to be V's, and it turned out to be an alleged impersonation account. People were saying that the social media team isn't really doing their job and they lack professionalism because they're tweeting out an account that isn't real. However, we don't know the background of this account. What if it actually created by a staff member? This was frustrating to people because the community has tried for a very long time to try to get this specific account taken down. So to see it promoted, it was very frustrating. But then there was also one comment where someone was saying that they hope that when V comes out of the military, that V will sue the label. And I'm just sitting here like, sue them for what? Sue them for promoting a link to a different channel? Where in the legal documents does it say that someone can't post a link on Twitter? Let me know what you think. Make sure you check out Patreon for more videos. A link down below. Thanks for the comment right here. Love you. Bye.